We'll now call our first panel of witnesses for this morning's hearing. And the hearing is entitled The Impact of the U.S. Tax Code on the Market for Corporate Control and Jobs. I'd like to welcome our three panelists here in the first panel. The first one is Jim Koch. Jim is founder of the Boston Beer Company and the brewer of Sam Adams Beer. The second is David Pyatt. David is the former chairman of the board and chief executive officer of Allergan. Thank you, David. And then Walter Galvin is here. He's the former vice chairman and chief financial officer of Emerson Electric. All three have great experience and expertise to bring to bear on this, and we appreciate their willingness to come forward this morning. I would ask you to stick with our timing system this morning. All of your written statement will be included in the record, and we want to have plenty of time for questions with you. We're going to ask you to limit your oral testimony, if you could, to 5 minutes. Mr. Koch.
Thank you, Chairman Portman, Ranking Member McCaskill, Senator Johnson, Senator Langford. It's an honor to be here today as your subcommittee investigates how the current corporate tax structure in the United States should be reformed to lessen the obstacles to starting, growing, and maintaining an American business. It's a little uncomfortable for me because I'm not used to talking about a beer in front of me, but I'll try to do it on plain old water.
We could probably send out for one if you need one. If you get halfway through it and you need a beer, just let us know.
That would be good. Yeah. Thank you. The Boston Beer Company had humble beginnings. I used my great-great-grandfather's recipe, actually from the Soulard district of West St. Louis, where his brewery stood in the 19th century, and I started brewing in my kitchen in 1984. I went from bar to bar to sell the idea of rich, flavorful American beer, which was quite novel. 30 years ago, I named my beer after the American revolutionary and founding father, Samuel Adams, whose statue stands in the Capitol representing Massachusetts. Boston Lager was released in April of 1985, and 6 weeks later, it got picked as the best beer in America at the Great American Beer Festival. Today, our family of beers includes over 60 varied and constantly changing styles of beer. We're now available in all 50 states and in 30 foreign countries. Today, Boston Beer Company is a team made up of 1,300 American employees with breweries in Boston, in Cincinnati, where I grew up, and in Pennsylvania. We've invested over $300 million in those breweries in the last 3 years, and we're proud that today the craft beer industry, which when I started was just a handful of semi-lunatics, has grown to over 3,600 local businesses all across the United States. But despite that growth, today almost 90% of the beer made in the United States is made by foreign-owned companies. And foreign-owned breweries have now begun acquiring American craft brewers, with 10 of the most successful ones having been acquired in recent years. So I'm concerned that growing and expanding an American-owned brewery is increasingly difficult because our corporate tax structure places American-owned companies at a competitive disadvantage to our foreign counterparts. It's not uncommon for me to receive visits from investment bankers interested in facilitating the sale or the merger of Boston Beer Company to foreign ownership. One of the principal financial benefits of such a transaction is to reduce the tax rate we pay. We're vulnerable because we currently report 100% of our income in the United States, and as a result, we pay a tax rate of about 38% on all of that income. Under foreign ownership, that rate, I'm told by investment bankers, would be reduced to the range of 25 to 30% immediately through various practices like expatriation of intellectual property, earnings stripping and the strategic use of debt, offshoring of services, and transfer pricing. So that means that $1 of pre-tax earnings is worth 62 cents to me under American ownership, but 72 cents under foreign ownership. Or to put it another way, Boston Beer Company is worth 16% more to a foreign owner simply because of the current U.S. tax structure. Why haven't we sold Boston Beer Company to a multinational or another foreign entity? I mean, the simple answer is just not who we are. I named my beer Samuel Adams after our patriot namesake. We were born in America. We've grown because of the advantages available in the United States, and we don't mind paying our taxes here in the U.S. in gratitude for the opportunities that exist in this country and that I certainly have enjoyed. But don't mistake that for good financial decision-making. I have to explain to shareholders why we haven't taken advantage of some of the strategies available to reduce our corporate tax burden by moving overseas. In response to economic pressures, other companies are saving millions, hundreds of millions of dollars through complex tax planning every year. And rest assured, senators, that while we're sitting here talking about corporate tax reform, there are folks in offices and boardrooms all over the world making their own version of corporate tax reform every day. The difference is that not one of them is accountable to your constituents. So Congress's inaction on this subject has created a system of do-it-yourself corporate tax reform that's available to few and understood by even fewer. Because of our broken corporate tax system, I can honestly predict that I will likely be the last American owner of Boston Beer Company. Due to hard work, innovation, and diligence, American craft brewers have created thousands of well-paying manufacturing jobs and created respect for American beer all around the world. I know of no manufacturing sector in the United States that has grown for 30 straight years and achieved double-digit growth for 16 straight quarters. But when these foreign acquisitions occur, American jobs are often cut or shipped overseas, less investment is made here in the United States, and other cost-cutting measures on management and sales forces are implemented, along with reductions in local philanthropy and community involvement. The solutions are pretty clear. Cut the highest in the world U.S. corporate tax rate to the mid-20s, bring America's international tax system in line with the rest of the industrialized world by allowing U.S. companies to bring their overseas earnings home, just like the British and Canadians allow their businesses to do. And Senator Portman's recent proposal with Senator Schumer provides strong bipartisan roadmap on the international piece of tax reform. With these reforms, I believe we can unleash a lot of job creation and innovation in this country. And without them, I fear America will fall behind economically. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Cook. Mr. Pyatt.
Thank you. Thank you, Chairman Portman, Ranking Member McCaskill, Senators Johnson and Langford. My name is David Pyatt, and I'm the former Chairman and CEO of Allergan. Until acquired by activists in March 2015, Allergan was a great 65-year-old American pharmaceutical company, a world leader in ophthalmology, medical aesthetics, and Botox therapeutic, as well as cosmetic. In my 17-year tenure as CEO, Allergan experienced tremendous growth, going from $600 million in sales in '97 to more than $7 billion in 2014. Lots of jobs were created, going from 4,000 to 10,500. Growth was principally organic and R&D driven. Allergan's R&D investments increased from less than $100 million in 1997 to over $1 billion in 2014, leading to a steady stream of regulatory approvals by FDA. In early 2014, Allergan's outlook was bright. We projected double-digit revenue growth and mid-teens increases in earnings per share for the next 5 years. But ultimately, those qualities, sustained growth, robust R&D, and $4 billion in cash, most of it located overseas, made Allergan a very attractive target for acquisition, especially for a foreign company. The U.S. tax code, as we've heard, creates advantages that are worth billions for foreign acquirers to buy up American companies. So what happened in 2014? We were targeted by Valeant, a Canadian company that has acquired over 100 pharmaceutical, medical device, and OTC companies in the last 7 years in a roll-up strategy. Valeant has a clear strategy of not investing in R&D. Valeant had just completed an $8 billion acquisition of Bausch & Lomb in 2013 and was too weak in too weak and laden with debt from that transaction to be able to buy Allergan on its own. So Valiant entered into a partnership with Pershing Square, run by activist investor Bill Ackman, to go after Allergan together. It was the first ever partnership of its type. In the February to April 2014 timeframe, using stock purchases and then options and derivatives, Pershing Square was able to accumulate 9.7% of Allergan's shares without making any public announcement. On April 22, Valiant bid $47 billion to buy Allergan, an increase from the $37 billion valuation when Pershing Square initiated its first purchases of stock, a premium obviously of $10 billion, or about 25%. Such a premium was enabled by enormous tax savings available to Valiant, with a 3% worldwide corporate tax rate, allied with a rapacious cost-cutting plan. In its pitch to investors, Valiant plan was to reduce Allergan's 26% effective tax rate to 9%, a difference of 17% or $500 million per year. Applying a price-earnings multiple to this $500 million, this gives Valiant and Pershing Square roughly a $9 billion valuation advantage. In simple terms, thinking back to the math, Allergan was worth $9 billion more simply by being moved to foreign domicile. On the day of announcing the bid, Pershing Square interestingly posted a profit of almost $1 billion. I sincerely hope that the SEC will investigate this novel structure regarding possible breach of the insider trading laws and other securities regulations. But back to Valiant. The Allergan board felt that the offer substantially undervalued the company. Valiant's plan was also to strip Allergan, cutting overall operating expenses by 47%, slashing R&D within that from more than $1 billion to just over $200 million per year, along with other market-building investments. Valiant planned to load up Allergan with more than $22 billion in new debt, taking the debt load of the combined company to more than $50 billion. After assessing many strategic alternatives, the Allergan board ultimately decided to seek out a so-called white knight. Of the potential suitors, it was clear to me that only a foreign domicile company could be in a position to outbid Valiant while still creating value for their own stockholders. Obviously, as we've heard, foreign acquirers have lucrative tools: debt push down, migration of intellectual property. Valiant contemplated both. In November 2014, Irish domiciled activist bid $66 billion for Allergan. Similar to Valiant, activists could immediately reduce Allergan's effective tax rate from 26% to 15%. Beyond just selling to the highest bidder, the Allergan board assessed an acquirer's commitment to innovation. Unlike Valiant, activist was and is committed to maintaining the best of Allergan in the combined company. Given the premium that had to be paid to secure control of our company, cost synergies, of course, had to be found. About $1.8 billion, but were a modest 11% of operating expenses across both companies. As for jobs, I'm no longer with the company, but estimate that about 1,500 jobs will be eliminated from the legacy Allergan side, mostly in California. The reduction in R&D, thank goodness, has been modest. With this sale, we could salvage what we could of a great American company. The last operating year was the best in our 65-year history. Sales increased by 16%, or over $1 billion to $7.1 billion. As a point of pride, activists adopted Allergan as the corporate name in June 2015. Looking back, I'm convinced that Allergan today would have remained an independent American company had it not been for the significant disadvantage caused by our uncompetitive U.S. corporate tax system. The implications are clear, not only for the pharmaceutical and biotech industry, but extend across many industries that are global. Unless Congress acts, I believe that many more innovative American companies will be lost. Thank you for the opportunity to testify about my interesting experience.
Thank you, Mr. Pyatt. Mr. Galvin.
Good morning, Chairman Portman.
Morning.
Good morning, Chairman Portman, Ranking Member McCaskill, and members of the committee. My name is Walter Galvin. I am the former Vice Chairman and Chief Financial Officer of Emerson, a $25 billion global manufacturing company founded in St. Louis 125 years ago. Emerson has over 110,000 employees and operations in more than 150 countries. In each of the last 3 years, Emerson paid $1.3 billion in taxes worldwide. Over half was paid in the United States. Emerson business is global. Over 55% of our sales are outside the U.S., and several of our major competitors are domiciled abroad. Being domiciled in the U.S. means we pay more in taxes on a worldwide basis. My testimony will focus on 3 areas. First, why America's tax cost on foreign profits is such a disadvantage to U.S. companies. Second, how other nations have set examples we can follow. And third, how Emerson can serve as an example of American-based multinational that lost out to foreign competitors because of our tax code. To begin, the combination of our high corporate tax rate and the way the U.S. taxes foreign profits can make U.S. companies more valuable in foreign hands, which is leading to American businesses being stripped away. A recent analysis by Ernst & Young found that from 2004 and 2013, foreign buyers acquired $179 billion more of U.S. companies than we acquired of theirs. Additionally, data provider Dealogic reports the gross value of foreign takeovers of U.S. companies doubled last year to $275 billion, and at the current rate will surpass $400 billion this year. These takeovers reflect thousands of U.S. companies leaving American shores. How can we stop this accelerating exodus? Congress must remove the premium only American companies pay by moving to a territorial system and reducing the corporate tax rate. We know it can be done. Other nations like the UK have successfully reduced their top rate. In 2009, the UK switched to a territorial system while their corporate rate stood at 28%. Now that rate is 20%, and earlier this month, the UK released a plan to drop that rate further to 18%. Companies are taking note. Monsanto, an American company also founded in St. Louis more than 100 years ago, is attempting to merge with a competitor and set up a new parent in the UK. It's no mystery why. I have 2 real examples of how Emerson's investors, shareholders, and employees have been directly impacted by the American out-of-date tax code. In 2006, Emerson sought to acquire a company called American Power Conversion, APC, a Rhode Island-based company producer of high-tech electronic equipment. At that time, over half of APC's earnings were made outside the U.S. Emerson competed against Schneider Electric, a French company, and Ohio-based Eaton Corporation to buy APC. Emerson valued the company at just under $5 billion, but Schneider ultimately acquired the company by bidding $5.5 billion. The principal reason Schneider valuation of APC was higher was due to the French tax law on repatriation. Headquartered in France, 95% of Schneider's repatriated profits are exempt from French taxes. So APC's profits are worth more to Schneider because they can repatriate it at a tax rate of under 2%. By contrast, if Emerson repatriated those earnings, we would be subject to a tax rate of approximately 17%. That 17% is the difference between our 35% corporate rate and foreign taxes we pay. The difference between Schneider's rate of 2% and Emerson's rate of 17% on a discounted cash flow basis is worth $800 million more to Schneider. Therefore, Schneider was able to bid Emerson, and what had once been an American company became a subsidiary of a French domiciled company. As for Eaton, they dropped out of the bidding process early, and about 6 years later acquired Ireland-based Cooper Industry. Eaton is now an Irish domiciled company enjoying a lower worldwide tax rate. Second, American worldwide system creates a perverse incentive to keep foreign profits abroad. A few years ago, Emerson bought a company in the UK called Chloride for about $1.5 billion with cash we earned abroad and kept abroad. We considered other options for that cash, but the U.S. would have charged us 10 to 15 cents in taxes on every dollar we bring back home. So where will we get a higher expected return? From $1 invested in the UK or only 85% in the United States. We need to reform the tax code sooner rather than later. Every time a company is acquired and their headquarters is moved, there's a real community impact. In addition to costing American jobs, this impacts local communities because of a decline in state and local taxes and a loss of corporate philanthropy and jobs. I am grateful that the Portman-Schumer framework is moving the conversation forward. In closing, we cannot expect to create more jobs at home if we continue to punish businesses like Emerson who want to remain headquartered here. American businesses and workers are the best in the world, and we're not asking for a tax handout. We're asking for a level playing field. With that, we compete with anyone in the world and win. Thank you, and I welcome your questions.
Thank you, Mr. Galvin. And look, I appreciate all three of you being here and testifying, and specifically going into some detail on case studies that involve your companies. We want to focus on the facts here, and you give us some great case studies. We're going to have a couple rounds here. The first round will be 7 minutes each. Second round will be 5 minutes each. We have some colleagues who have shown up, and I know everybody's under pressure, so I'm going to try to keep my initial questions to less than 7 minutes. I want to focus on a couple things. One, what I'm hearing from you all is that there are a number of problems with the U.S. tax code and the perverse effect it has on U.S. jobs and investment. One is you're just less competitive, and it makes more sense to have your businesses in the hands of a foreign acquirer because of the tax savings. And there's some amazing numbers that you provided us here today on the extent to which that's true. Second, you talked about, and Mr. Galvin just mentioned the fact that it's harder to grow as an American company, because when you're competing for acquiring another company, you're finding foreign competition coming in that can pay a premium because of their after-tax profits. And then third is this whole issue that you've all referenced, but Mr. Galvin talked about, which is when you've got this lockout effect, you've got the money stuck overseas because you can't bring it back because of the prohibitively high rate. It's an incentive to make your investments overseas, all three of which are bad for U.S. jobs. So I guess I'd start with Mr. Cook, and I thought your analysis was really interesting. I heard you say something about investment bankers giving you a proposal frequently. Can you sort of pull back the curtain on that a little bit and tell us what's happening in the real world? I mean, do you get proposals from investment bankers or others saying, gosh, why don't you do this inversion, or why don't you make yourself a target for a foreign acquisition?
Sure.
Would you mind turning on your microphone? Thank you.
Yes, and as we heard from the other panelists, if you're an attractive American company, you've got the things that characterize American business of innovation and creativity, willingness to sort of create a new industry. Those things are very attractive to foreign owners, and that puts you on the radar screen. So investment bankers, that's what they do. You know, they find these opportunities and they work both sides, put them together. So it's a regular feature of my life, talking to investment bankers who can do the math.
Yeah. So you have U.S. investment banking firms coming to your companies and saying, you know, why don't you do this? This makes sense for you. One final question. You talked about the fact that you may be the last U.S. owner of your company, sadly, and you talked a little about the shareholder pressure. Are you responding to that shareholder pressure by saying, you know, we can become a foreign company and maybe make some savings, but you know, we have a commitment to this country, and how does that conversation go?
Well, I am very fortunate for two reasons. One, I have all the voting shares. So
that helps.
It's a wonderful form of democracy. I vote.
I wish I had that here.
It's a good thing. And the other is, under Massachusetts law, I am not legally required to maximize shareholder value. I am not legally required to run the company only for the benefit of shareholders, but under Massachusetts law, I am allowed to take into account the interests of other stakeholders. So that's about as good as it gets.
Yeah. I suppose it's clear to everybody on the panel that that is a highly unusual situation, both in terms of having voting shares and also having this fiduciary responsibility be broader than it is in most of your cases. And I really appreciate your patriotism and your coming here today.